Funny thing, she was very light skinned. So it's kind of funny that she was like we used to joke about that. Like she was pretty much like a white looking woman, but she was black, and so it was kind of funny. Almost like got the best of both worlds. I don't really mean that. How's it going, everyone? My name is Justin. Welcome back to my channel. You've seen the thumbnail, you've seen the title. We're going to be talking about Black People Anonymously Answer 7 Burning Questions by Jubilee. Jubilee is actually a channel that I watch when I'm not streaming or doing any other content creation. So now that I'm doing commentary stuff, I'm now looping them, among others, into the fold. But obviously, I'm going to have some opinions on this, so let's just jump into it. Oh, didn't even read this off the bat. Mask Off is a social experiment in exploring authenticity and anonymity. The views expressed in this video are the opinions and experiences of the cast members whose names have been changed for their privacy. So since I do watch some Jubilee, I guess the idea is that these are the people at Jubilee that are, you know, wearing the masks and going to be getting questions asked.
In an age of call-outs, culture wars, and
Nope.
perfect facades,
Oh.
people can be afraid to express how they really feel. So we brought together 7 strangers, protected their identities, and asked them all 7 burning audience questions.
Okay, so already I was mistaken. It's not cast members as in the people at Jubilee. It looks like these are people that I guess they've brought in, like their maybe community or just people out there that might watch their content or survey them. So, okay.
What will be revealed when we take the mask off?
Okay, so they are taking the mask off. Okay.
If your answer is yes, you'll turn your light on. F the police.
Okay, hold up. All right, so I don't know how long this video is going to be with me pausing the way through it. And I realize as I'm making this that it teeters on things that can be political, right? I was very upset with the police. Obviously 2020 George Floyd stuff, but that was how I felt then. I don't entirely feel that way now, but I'm kind of curious how this is going to go. I probably would not turn my light on now.
I know that there are quote unquote good cops, but if you are working in an entire force with individuals who are essentially mostly racist, and where police come from, the history of it with being the sheriffs of slaves and tracking down slaves using dogs or whatever they're using, it's just wearing that badge. It's just, you're never really here for us, and we never feel safe for that reason. So, them.
The only reason why I can't fully say that, like he just said, there are some good out there, and personally having a cousin who is a police officer, but everything else behind that, and all of the other people who bring the racist and pretty much up mentality to it, yeah, no, it's them for sure.
All right, we're gonna have everyone join the conversation.
I don't really feel anything towards this statement because I haven't had any encounters with police, like, ever.
Why do you have to have a personal experience? Why can't you just look at the damage that has been done?
It's different because I feel like I feel the weight of my ancestors in certain situations in other areas of my life than I do with the police.
Okay, this is not me taking away from the Black community in general, because police are always targeting us, but I find it interesting that only the Black men had agreed with that.
I'm like on the fence with it because I know that there are Black cops out there that are truly trying to protect and serve, and I really don't know what I would do if we completely destroyed the police system. I would be scared because it's like, okay, well, I don't believe that is the solution, but yes, Black men have that main encounter with the police, and sometimes it's annoying because it's like, okay, is this the only cause that y'all care about, is police brutality? But yeah, it's halfway with me.
I think feelings do become more intense though once you have an experience.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah. No, definitely.
And so like, you know, seeing situations where my dad got pulled over, got questioned, got harassed for no reason, then to experience my situation down in Texas. I mean, I had bought guns for the first time, registered them, followed everything to the T, and then still get pressed up against the side of my car like I did something wrong when I did it the exact way that y'all said I had to do it.
All right, so I'm going to jump in. I want to say a couple things, and I probably should have paused a bit earlier because I wanted to get this thought out, but I'll get it out now. So around the time of the George Floyd protests, of which I participated in, I will say that I obviously I don't entirely remember who was speaking earlier, but someone had mentioned that, do you have to have something happen to you for you to understand how bad it is? And obviously it's no. There's a lot of issues politically, and some of the videos I normally make, which are centered around gaming, that none of the bad stuff happens to me really, but I still care and I'm very passionate about it, and I can get very worked up about things that don't directly happen to me because it happens to other people. So, and again, to somebody else, I think mentioned this a little bit earlier in the video, like I haven't had really bad run-ins with police. I've had run-ins with police as far as just getting pulled over in my life, but it's never, I'm from New Mexico originally, moved out to Texas. I haven't had a bad interaction. The closest to a bad interaction I've ever had with the police was actually, I don't even know what year it would have been at this point now, maybe like 2013. I got pulled over for running to this day, I'm saying I ran a yellow light, but they caught me running a red light, got pulled over. And it was like not five. It might've been 4 police officers that pulled me over. And just so this video isn't super long, the person that pulled me over, I heard from another police officer was a rookie. And so they were just like, oh, this guy's a rookie. Just, let him do his thing. But what they were pulling me over for, and I'm not justifying them doing this, and I'm not going to try to claim like it was a black person thing, but they had said that they smelled something in my car. And so given that I was running a yellow light, red light, they thought they needed to question me and have me step outside the vehicle and all that. But to their almost like credit, I would say, I actually did clean my car like the night before, because that was going to a ceremony that night. So I wanted things to smell nice. And so they smelled that and thought, okay, what's going on here? But I just kind of wanted to interject a quick anecdote about my own personal experiences, because I haven't had something super negative like you might see on the internet when it comes to being a black person interacting with the police. And yet, even though that hasn't happened to me directly, I still have very passionate feelings about how they treat other people.
That experience right there, my dad's situation started it, and then my situation is what finalized it.
Are Asians racist towards you?
Not me. Not that I've encountered.
I have a neighbor who is very privileged. She's married to a white man. She's Asian, and I feel like that comes a lot nowadays in America. I feel like Asian women are trying to be the white woman of America, and they're not realizing that they're also in marginalized communities just as we are.
Especially Asians that are born into American culture. It seems like they're just pretty much white, and they don't have any empathy for other minorities.
I have had negative interactions with like Asian people or like other people because I'm black and because colorism is a thing, but I've also had like positive interactions. So I feel like, yeah, Asian, it's just a very generalized term.
I know it happens, of course, but me personally, I have not experienced racism from the Asian community. I do totally agree with the idea of colorism, because it does seem like the darker you are, the quote uglier you are in any ethnicity.
Okay, so obviously going to jump in and interject a little bit of a personal anecdote on this one. I can't speak for this person entirely, but my mother is half Japanese, and that part I had to pause on, right? The dark you are, the uglier you are. My mom and my dad would tell me stories about her upbringing, being half Japanese in the 50s. So, no, well, she was born in 54. So, I guess like in the early 60s. So you can kind of imagine, or maybe you can't, but I would imagine that it was kind of rough being somebody who's half Japanese, not too far removed from World War II, and being the shade of black that she was, or darkness. But I personally, again, this is another one where if it has happened, maybe I'm just oblivious, but I don't really recall too many instances off the top, or any instances where I was treated differently because I was darker, from an Asian person specifically. I will also say, though, that from certain Asian people, and I used to say this when I was a kid, obviously, black person in the room, right? There were times when I did encounter Asian people that, because of the way I look, they would say things like, are you mixed? I remember hearing that a lot when I was a kid. Are you mixed? I would hear that from black people or people of color, Hispanic people who grew up in the New Mexico area. And they would say, are you mixed? And I didn't really know what that meant. That's actually how I figured out and found out that I was part Japanese, because I was a stupid, dumb kid, so I didn't know. But that's how I found out, because I kept hearing it so much that I was like, okay, why is it that like I'm getting asked this question so many times from different people, and I ended up learning from my mom, you know, what my heritage was. But yeah, I had heard that, and when I was around some Asian people, there's only one person I can think of, and I think as I embellish this story in my mind, I don't think it's that big of a deal. But his mother, when I was a little kid, his mother was Japanese, and his father, white guy, was in the military. And I never see. It's like when I think back on the story, it's like I never really think that they thought I was lesser. But I wouldn't be surprised. Every Asian person I've encountered in my life has always noticed that there's a little bit of Asian in me. So thinking back to that now, it might, maybe there was something there as far as her seeing me and going, hey, this guy doesn't quite look like I would expect, but.
Which does suck.
I think the American influence is big. And that's on anybody that comes, no matter where you come from, what background. When you get to America, you spend a couple years here, you start to see how things are done, whether they're right or wrong. You see how things are done, how black people are treated, how white people are treated. So a little bit after I left the military, I spent a couple years in Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, and South Korea. These places were places where I was accepted more so than back home. It was shocking to me to not be followed around in stores in South Korea. It was shocking to me to not be treated or even looked at the same way I would be walking down the street in certain places here.
This is question 3.
I have dated outside my race.
So I have.
In my past dating history.
So I already forgot the rules of this show or this video. This video, is it that I guess if you agree with the point, you agree to light up your video, or I guess you press a like button. But if you, and then I guess later the disagreeers will come in and comment on it. So real quick, only because I already missed it. Question 3 was, okay, right.
Outside my race.
I was saying that I have. So 3 people
in
have.
my past dating history, I feel like, you know, I tasted the rainbow pretty much. Like, I've dated East Asian men, I've dated Hispanic men. It's different. You know, like, you're never gonna find somebody outside of your race that's gonna 100% understand you, understand your struggle, understand your family, why you do things the way that you do.
Right.
When I'm dating them, I know it's gonna be different, and I feel that's kind of like why I'm entertaining the fact of even doing that.
Okay.
I don't think that I would necessarily date a white person. I just feel like there's a disconnect, but as long as like they're willing to, like, you know, have those conversations with me and understand like my blackness, I want to have those conversations with them, and I don't mind what their race is.
I think for me, it's just all about my comfort level with you and how much I can relate. And like he said, I think a white woman would be like at the bottom of the totem pole, just because we don't have that much to connect
The totem
on,
pole.
But I'm not opposed to it. I would just kind of rather work with something that I know there's a lot of compatibility there.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of people, I mean, I've listened to so many types of videos on YouTube that I know that sentiment has been shared so many times, that there's a lot of, you know, races that kind of date within their race. And a big part, I would imagine, is because within the culture of whatever it happens, whatever race it is, there's that understanding and that familiarity, and people do want a little bit of that, or a decent amount of that when they're pursuing somebody on a romantic level. You know, there's certain things you don't have to quite explain, you know, when you're coming from the same culture. So, and, you know, white is relatively is pretty distant from the black culture.
I'm not opposed to dating outside my race, but in terms of marriage, I would love to marry a black man.
Okay.
Yeah.
Think about our ancestors. Like, they're probably turning in our grave. Like, they're like, what are you doing? Like, we've done so much, and you want to be with this white person or this non-black person?
I've never dated outside of my race, but maybe I should, because a lot of black men tend to go to non-black women.
Here we go.
Yes, and because
they're easier.
And because they have European features, softer hair. They like the Kim Kardashian looking woman.
Exotic.
You know, you want the black woman aesthetic, but you need the European features. So maybe I should date outside of my race, but
Man, that's starting to sound like, and I'm dipping my toe in some of the other content that I watch on YouTube, but that, I don't want to call it stereotypical, but it is somewhat of a common, you know, concern that black women have about, you know, black men dating outside their race or finding light-skinned black women more attractive than dark-skinned black women. I had a girlfriend, we talked about that. Funny thing, she was very light-skinned. So it's kind of funny that she was like we used to joke about that. Like she was pretty much like a white-looking woman, but she was black, and so it was kind of funny. Almost like got the best of both worlds. I don't really mean that, but yeah, I mean, I guess I can understand that perspective, but at the same time, you know, I am the product of people who didn't date within their race, and so it's a bit tricky for me. I can understand like most things, there's nuance to both sides of it, but and I've also dated people outside my race. So
I personally, like you said, I want to build with the black man. I want to have black children. That's what I want to do. But with this generation of black men, I don't know if it's possible.
Me having sex with a white man, it's the master aspect. It's the buck breaking history. If you know what buck breaking is.
I don't. The alleged act of publicly punishing a male slave, typically by first flogging him and subsequently sexually assaulting. Hold on, this is in the way. Sexually assaulting. Oh, the closed captions are getting me. Sexually assaulting or raping him in front of other slaves in order to humiliate him. Okay. I don't think I would have inferred that from just what it was. Okay, cool.
It's all of that combined, and then the idea of most times, even in heterosexual relationships, it's usually a fetish for the individual to be with you. It's either because you have a nice body, or your skin is so dark and lovely, or because you have, you know, that tool that they want, if you know what I'm talking about. So yeah, in general, it's always something on your body that they want. And if it's genuinely true love, that can happen. But for the most part, I just think interracial dating is disgusting.
Okay.
I've felt oppressed by my own community.
So I'll answer first because I have the pause button, so I have the ability to do that. I have felt oppressed by my own community. No, that delves way deep into stuff that I obviously won't have time to go into now, but no. But I'm curious what they have to say.
I actually sometimes feel very uncomfortable in spaces full of black people. If you're not desirable as a black woman, if you're not desirable to men, then you tend to get overlooked. I have to work my ass off for things that I want. Black men, cis hetero black men specifically, they oppress all of us. And it sucks because I want to be with a black man, but it's like, I have to try to appeal to my oppressor.
I'm gay, and I'm also black. So within the black community, I feel like, again, when we go out to these protests, when we go out to these clubs or parties, and I'm in heterosexual spaces, I feel like, oh, yeah, he's black, but like he's gay, so we can't really mess with him. Like he can't really be in our space. And it's like, how is this your space that you claimed over a sexuality and a sexual preference, essentially, rather than us being the same race?
Yeah, of course. Like you were saying, like if you're in the LGBTQ community, it's intersectionality. So people are more cool with me if I'm passing and they see me as like a cis black guy versus if they know I'm trans.
In terms of my experience, I feel like maybe black people were gatekeeping opportunities, or like trying to be super stingy, or trying to be the token black person, and not really, they kind of like bully other black people to making them be like, you don't deserve to be in my space, like this is my zone, this is the area that I'm working in. And it's kind of like they're trying to keep other black people from being successful. Like I feel like I've seen that a lot.
And I'm not going to necessarily disagree with what someone has seen. I guess I'll kind of go into this now, even though I'm not going to go in depth. I didn't grow up around a whole bunch of black people. That wasn't the common demographic. I mean, in my upbringing, I was oftentimes one of, if I wasn't one of like 3 or 4, I was the only black person in my, you know, like circumstance, right? Whether it was a classroom or whether it was like a sports team, whatever the case was. So even to this day, at the age that I am now, it's fascinating to hear this happen. And I know about it. It's not like, wow, I've never heard of this happening before. But this is what this person has seen happen. I can't necessarily say that it's happened to me, or if it has happened to me, I could be oblivious and I just didn't notice it.
I feel like that's happened to me before too.
I'm sure it has in some way. It probably has.
When
but
I was living in Mississippi, I was around predominantly black people. I didn't feel any different. But now that I'm back here in California and I'm around, you know, other races, like, well, I can see why this could be considered colorist, or I can see how in this situation maybe I'm feeling, you know, like I'm not as worthy as these other people. But I just couldn't use the word oppressed really to describe how my experiences have went.
Have you ever wished you weren't black?
Have I ever wished that? Ooh, man. On my very, very small YouTube channel that I have no idea how many people might catch this particular line. There was a point, yeah. There was a point, because at least for me as a kid, I kind of, it's hard to say because it's been so long. But I think I can, if not remember circumstances where this happened, I do remember the feeling. And it's just, I remember it feeling weird that I was the only person, you know, of my kind. I'm like Kal-El, Superman on Kansas, Smallville, Kansas. You know, yeah, I mean, it was like everybody around me was either white or Hispanic. And so it was just like, why am I like this? I want to be kind of like everybody else. You know, I want to be the person that, you know, fits in and looks. I mean, that's kind of what it kind of is as a kid. Like there's those teenage years where you kind of want to break away and be your own unique person. You're going to dye your hair. You're going to wear your super exotic clothes that are going to make you stand out. But there is also a point as a kid where you kind of just want to fit in and be like everybody else. And so I think that even though I can't recount a specific story, I remember the feeling of feeling like an outsider and feeling like, man, it would just be a whole lot more or easier for me if I was like everybody else. So I'd say, yeah.
Like,
only one.
I want to say, record straight, I love myself now. Like, I love being a black woman. But, like, for so long, because of also family members feeding into the whole idea of, like, oh, you know, you're so pretty because you're lighter. For so long as a child, I associated being black as being something that was a bad thing because I saw how people that were darker than me were treated. And I was just like, oh, I don't want to be this anymore. But I mean, with a lot of love and compassion and hardcore teaching, I was like, you know, being black is honestly the best thing ever.
We lit. I just feel like we're lit, and I get where that comes from. That's a part of colorism, and that happens a lot in our community. And I just feel like if we all just accepted our blackness more, we would just be great.
Like when I was younger, I moved to like a town that was like predominantly like white and Hispanic. I never felt like specifically like, oh, I wish I wasn't black, but I did like look at other people and say, I wish I had hair like them. I wish I looked more like them.
Like, I love being the race that I am.
Yeah, Maurice pretty much just saying, I think that's how you say it, but he pretty much had the same thing that I had. I don't know if I ever wanted my hair to be like them or like I wanted to be like them, but it was really close to that, right? It was the idea of like, I look like this, and there's kind of a trend of what other people around me look like. And, you know, I think, and I was never really bullied or picked on or look at, there's the black kid over there. It was never like that I can remember, because I lived in a very weird, small, new town in New Mexico. So we didn't really get that. But I will say that like there were certain things where it's kind of like you could tell that everybody kind of had their clique, and I didn't have one. And so it was like, man, if I just, you know, looked a tad bit more in line, you know, I think I'd fit in a little bit more.
But having 4C hair and having darker knuckles, darker kneecaps, especially in elementary school and middle school, getting through that was really hard. Now at this age, I'm learning to accept all parts of me, but I still battle with it like every day.
There were times where I maybe wish that I wasn't Black American, that maybe I wish I was an African woman or Brazilian.
Okay.
Because I feel like Black Americans, like we kind of were disconnected from our African roots and our heritage. And that part kind of hurts because it's like we don't really have much to call our own besides like Ebonics or AAVE. But Black American culture has ultimately set the tone for a lot of modern day pop culture too, so I'm proud of that part as well.
I would raise my kids differently than my parents raised me.
If I were to have kids, I would imagine. I almost feel like this extends beyond just being black. I mean, but if I answer it as this video's context, yeah, I would. I mean, I don't want someone to grow up exactly like I did, or in the same way. I think I'd want to take as much of the good that came out of my upbringing and kind of maybe show my child or children that, but I don't necessarily know if I'd want to bring all of it. You're gonna learn.
If you haven't had an experience with whether sexual abuse or some type of violence in your home, you are lucky in the black community because it happens to so many of us. And I feel like with me experiencing that growing up, I would never beat my child. I don't want to have to feel like beating my child is the resource or a source of like them respecting me. Yes. I want them to know about mental health and take their mental health serious, because we don't take it serious in the black community at all.
I love that you mentioned that specifically about mental health, because it's something you can't talk about in our community sometimes. It's like, well, what's wrong with you? Like, are you crazy? I'm gonna whoop your tail. Like, you shouldn't be acting this way. I give you everything. You have no reason to be depressed. I don't want to reciprocate that onto my children, and I don't want them to feel like if they're feeling depressed, if they're feeling overwhelmed, I don't want them to think they can't come to me and talk about it. My parents, they didn't have that opportunity to communicate with their parents because they were raised in a completely
different generation. I mean, that's kind of what I was thinking as she was giving her answer, is that, you know, that wasn't something that I think I just grew up with. I mean, I want to say that's something that's relatively new, right? Like, even though it isn't, but at the same time, the idea of like you're just overwhelmed, it didn't feel like a black community thing with me. But at the same time, you know, I mean, my family was black. It wasn't like I was entirely around Hispanic and white people all the time, but it kind of just felt like you just weathered it, you know. But if I were to have kids, I mean, yeah, I think mental health, sure. And the beating thing, without going too long-winded, yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily know if it's, you know, elephant in the room, but I felt like just hitting, sounds weird to say now, but like hitting your kids with a belt or getting a butt whooping, that's what we call it, right? Getting a butt whooping, or the switch where you get like a tree branch from outside. My dad would get that. That was just part of it, you know, and it never felt like abuse, you know, but there also wasn't really a prevalent, you know, child protective services, you know, that didn't, the idea of something like child protective services didn't come in until, I think, when I was on my way to adulthood already. I think I might have been like 16-ish, maybe 17, when I started hearing about the idea of child protective services. They'd probably already been around, but I didn't hear about it. And by that point, I wasn't getting spankings anymore. So
different generation.
Okay.
Yeah. So now, like, I see my mom was, you know, raising me this way because that's what she's used to, but I'm gonna cut it off with my line.
Sure.
Our kids are probably going to be like, yeah, I ain't doing that. When I have my kids, like, each generation gets wiser and they learn something else or have resources to something else. So I just want to always highlight the good things that my parents did.
Sure, yeah.
I've already acknowledged them and addressed the bad things with them, but now I can forgive and let it go and just highlight what they did do right and kind of mix that with my own.
I agree with that.
I can't be honest about who I am.
I can't be honest about who I am. No, I can. So, I can be honest about who I am.
Being black, like if I'm in a white space, I'm like constantly like, how am I coming off? But a lot of times for me, it's like, you know, in terms of being trans also, like, how am I walking? How am I talking? How am I being received? Do these people, are they speaking at me or looking at me like they're comfortable with me? And it's just pretty tiring sometimes when I'm around other people and I'm constantly checking myself.
It sounds it sounds exhausting. It's like being tense all the time. Oof.
Age of like cancel culture, it's just really easy. I feel like even if you want to be honest, it's like sometimes you can, because you have like a fear of getting canceled or a fear of people like lashing out on you. And I feel like in certain senses like that, I can't be completely honest in terms of like my views on certain things, just because of like how people are going to react.
it takes a lot for a person to be themselves and fully own their identity, no matter who you are or what you are. So living in that, I've learned to own that, and I'm always blunt. I'm always me. What you see is what you get. If you got a problem, you can leave.
I think that what's worth bringing up, and I don't know if anybody's going to say this, so probably should have waited, but it takes a lot of courage, I would say, to be like that, you know, or what's the opposite of courage? It's almost like disregard, right? Because there's attitudes where people are just like, I don't care, like I'm gonna be how I want to be, and then it's like, oh man, this person's kind of an embarrassment. But I think, I don't even know if I have the words for it now, but I feel like the idea of, you know, I'm just gonna be honest about who I am, and I'm not gonna care about what other people think of me. I think that takes a lot of courage. I think that's really hard to do.
So yeah,
It's exhausting to try to defend yourself all the time about who you are, but at the end of the day, I sleep better at night knowing that I'm just me.
Yeah. That was cool. That was a really awesome video. I mean, much like some of the other stuff that Jubilee puts out, I used to watch and I just haven't gotten around to it. But things like Middle Ground, it's not necessarily the idea of getting to a sort of resolution or here's how we're going to move the world forward. I think it's more, one of their tags for a while was empathy. And I think the idea is just really kind of getting this information out there so that people are just kind of aware of what others are going through in the world. But I thought this was a really good video. I'm almost going to regret saying this, but I'll say it. It sounds like these people are way blacker than me because I didn't grow up around a whole lot of black people. I didn't necessarily get entangled in a lot of black community and black culture things until I was almost an adult. I mean, it's not like I was never around black people, but I think for me, it was kind of more, I didn't really start encountering them on the regulars, like as people that I would just chill and hang out with until I was probably getting ready to go to college. So probably about 18, 19. So, and then once I ended up moving out to Texas, surprisingly, in the city that I live in, Austin, that's when I really started to come across more of it. So, but yeah, like I said, really good video. I like this one. I'm going to try to do, you know, depending on what I find out there and what makes its way to my timeline, I'm going to try to react to more Jubilee content because I think it is very uplifting. It does make me feel good. But other than that, really cool video. I'll catch y'all in the next one and check out my other videos if you haven't seen them already. Peace.